Well, what do you know? We're back. This is Night Terrors Radio. Thanks everybody for showing up.
We
Hope
are.
everybody has a great time tonight as we discuss Dogmen. That's going to be our focus tonight. It's going to be Dogmen.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is something that I'm personally fascinated with, by the way. I'm fascinated with tales of Dogmen. Or if we really want to boil it down to brass tacks, werewolves. You know, this is the description of what we would say would be a modern day werewolf being seen not only in Middle America, but all parts of the world. But we get a lot of reports from Wisconsin, Michigan,
Michigan Dogman.
Michigan Dogman,
Tennessee.
Recently in Texas.
Ooh,
The
recently
zoo.
in Texas.
Yeah, there's a sighting outside a zoo. Austin, I believe.
Yep. One got shot
Right.
in Montana. Who knew?
Steers, queers, and weirs. If
There
it's
you
the
go.
rhyme scheme, if you
Yeah.
want to pronounce it that way, and I'm
Right.
fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with changing up that rhyme scheme a little bit. It works for me. So how have you been, Rob? Because it's been like forever since we've been on the air.
I'm excited that we're back on the air. I'm excited that we're back doing shows. I'm looking forward to getting back and doing this and reaching out and touching the people from a respectable distance because of the restraining order.
Right, not being able to reach out and touch them again because of the OOP. I
Right.
understand completely.
You know,
It's the story of my life.
From a respectable distance.
It's good to see you, man. It's good to talk to you. I'm getting a little bit of a cold. So, my voice is a little bit wonky, but hopefully I won't get the full-blown thing. It's beginning this little tickle thing going on here. For those who don't know, my name is Ash Hamilton. I'm from horror-fix.com. We've got with us tonight my ever-vigilant brother from another mother, my hetero life mate, Rob Pastilli. And
Hi.
we have a new horrorfix.com associate, Ricky, who's with us tonight on the second mic. Has been doing a lot of reviews for us, been working a lot with HorrorFix, so we're happy to have everybody here. I'm ready to talk Dogmen. I'm ready to talk werewolves. I think we're going to have a blast tonight. We've already talked about sexual positions that Dogmen apparently can't fit themselves into. We got that out of the way off the air, so we're not going to ruin it for anybody now. You'll just have to...
I can't say I won't go back to that, but...
I probably will at about 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep.
I really think we need to
erase
hit
all that kind of a search history.
I think we need to talk news just so that we can get this show off on the right foot.
Well, without further ado, let's roll our news clip.
All right. So, Ricky, I know you don't, I'm sure you've listened to the show in the past and you know I have a weird fascination with Florida Man. He is my personal favorite cryptid. And when it comes, Florida Man, Sasquatch is like way down here. Florida Man's
a good one.
Takes
it's
it all the way.
It keeps on giving. It's like the Jelly of the Month Club. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is, I chose this story based on our topic for tonight. I'm just going to read the headline and we'll let it marinate for a second. Florida man arrested after having public sex with a dog, damaging church nativity scene. That's the headline.
Why do I think before this happened, and forgive me, people out there, are people who fanatically follow the band Insane Clown Posse, but for some reason, I want to say that this guy just like jumped up, yelled "whoop whoop," and then proceeded to do this horrible heinous act. It registers with me as a thing.
I can picture it.
Like there might have been orange Fanta
right in my mind.
There could have been orange Fanta involved, and
a ton of orange Fanta. I mean, you can't get that off of the baby Jesus, by the way. And also the orange Fanta.
So it's a all right. So this is a very short story, but here it goes. A Florida man was arrested after he had sex with a dog in front of families wrecked a nativity scene at a nearby church, and attempted to steal a vehicle. Chad Mason, 36, was arrested on several charges, including sexual activity with an animal, exposing sexual organs, and criminal mischief to a place of worship. So it says here that the dog that he...
That is so much to unpack.
The dog that
It
he
had to be a
attacked,
Chad too.
it was a golden doodle. And I think I know what happened. I think he heard golden diddle and just went off the rails. But
You know,
it was...
when you said it was a golden doodle, Rob, I thought you were talking about like, you know, we were naming like crazy acts.
Right.
You know, so it was just like, I mean, he went off the rails. He went all kinds of crazy doodle. Or golden doodle. He went all kinds of golden doodle.
It says here he knew the owner of the golden doodle and was taking it for a walk outside of an apartment complex. And at 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday, he then began having sex with the dog in front of multiple adults and a child who was under 16 years old. One of the adult witnesses confronted Mason, who then fled the scene to Northwood Presbyterian Church, where he entered the church and proceeded to knock over the nativity display, break several potted plants, and throw children's toys from the playground area.
That is just pure bedlam. I mean, that is so much chaos.
He then
in one act.
He then went to an adjacent neighborhood where he destroyed a mailbox. It doesn't say how.
I can only imagine.
And then attempted to steal a car. Here's the best part about this. He was released on bond, and he didn't spend any time. No time in jail.
This is like how many licks does it take to get the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? How much methamphetamine does it take to do what that guy did sequentially?
Right.
That's like a week's worth of Florida Man activities
in one afternoon.
At 4:30 p.m.
Right. So like, you gotta.
That's a life of getting worked up at odd hours.
I mean, it's 5 o'clock in Central Time, so.
Isn't that the whole like it's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere?
Somewhere, yeah.
I mean, so like I could just see him like on the calendar app in his phone. 4 o'clock walk dog, 4:30 fuck dog, 4:45 fuck nativity scene. Yeah, what the hell?
I mean, that reads like Hunter S. Thompson's dream journal or something. It's like so bizarre and random, all of these events. I want to believe that like someone noticed that he had like a small radio receiver in his ear. You know, like he had to do these things or else they were like going to kill his daughter.
Oh yeah, like a Liam Neeson kind of thing.
But right. You're like, okay.
You're not gonna be able to really see the picture on my phone, and I don't know how to share the screen, but I mean, if you want to pull up the news story, I sent it to you. You could probably pull up his picture. He looks,
for what we saw of the picture, that looks about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like a Chad.
Yeah, I would imagine that. But yeah, I mean, in my world, you know, Chad got involved in something. He got in way over his head. Right? They kidnapped his daughter. He doesn't have custody of her because he's Chad.
Right.
Right?
That's the only way I see it happening.
Right. And then they're just feeding him all this stuff to do. Yeah, only in movies, it's usually like, again, like I was saying, like, okay, there are 2 guards at this bank. The one on the left has asthma. Rush up and punch him in the chest. Right? Like that's how it would be.
It's like Saw.
Right.
You have 2 choices.
What was the movie with Crank with Jason Statham where he had to keep his heart rate up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is similar, except in the earpiece, they're like, okay, listen, you need to go walk the dog. Okay. You're going to walk to the usual area. It's okay. There's going to be a lot of kids there. Okay. All right. Looks like you're there. We're going to go ahead and just have you turn around a little bit. Make sure that everybody else can see you. Okay. All right. Start fucking that dog. What?
Yeah.
The dog. You're going to start. You're really going to go to town on this thing. Fuck that dog. And then once he was in that deep, I
Right.
mean, everything. At that point, I think that they were just, it went from 0 to 100 so quickly that whoever was feeding him this shit was just random. Get that mailbox. And they would just send him random places because the guy would do anything, apparently.
Not the black mailbox, not the black mailbox. Get the blue mailbox, the one with the birds painted on it.
Right. And you're going to drop kick it. You're going to drop kick it. Get a running start. Get a running start. That's the movie I want to see.
Yeah.
Although it crescendos pretty quickly, unfortunately.
It's probably next season on Black Mirror. I mean,
It probably is.
Coming.
Oh, also, before we get into the Dogmen stuff, because we have to, because this is a Dogmen show. Has anyone been lucky enough to watch the trailer for Cocaine Bear?
No.
Based on a true story.
Yes, I did watch it the other day.
Yeah, I saw the trailer last night. I went to the theater to see a movie in IMAX,
Oh wow.
and the Cocaine Bear trailer was on the IMAX. Beautiful. Beautiful. It was like you've only seen thumbnail pictures of most of Da Vinci's stuff, and then you go to the IMAX, and it's really big. So I had seen the trailer,
It's the only way to watch Cocaine
and it's a
Bear.
native form on the internet, but on the IMAX, Cocaine Bear took on an entirely new life for me, and went from, yeah, I'll watch that too. I need to see this film. I need to see it in the right kind of setting. I need to plan my day around it.
It's going to have to be seen on IMAX.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
other
gonna have
way.
to be seen on IMAX. It's a bear that's hyped up on cocaine. That's shot for IMAX in my mind.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, it's shot for IMAX.
Now, imagine the bear hyped up on cocaine in Florida.
With an earpiece. Holy shit, this
There
is the
you
movie.
go.
The bear is sentient. It is sentient. They're telling the bear to do stuff. Bear is hyped up on cocaine. Hyped up. They're like, okay, here's what you need to do. The bear's like, what you need to do is you need to get 150 feet of the best tensile strength yard hose you possibly can. You're going to stick part of that up your ass. The next, you're going to fashion it into a lasso. And that is the beginning of Cocaine Bear.
Just wouldn't it? But here's the funny part about it: is in Florida, that wouldn't even be front page news if it happened.
No.
Think about it. That'd be like page 6, buried under the horoscopes.
Well, people in Florida are watching the Cocaine Bear trailer going, I don't get it.
Yeah,
This is normal everyday
I
life.
don't get it.
it's like Barry from down the street.
Is it
Barry.
actually a Florida
It has to be
documentary?
buried down the street. So for those of you who have made it past us talking about people sticking lawn hoses into orifices, we're going to move on to the meat and potatoes of tonight's subject. We're going to talk about Dogmen. Do you want to go first, Rob? Because you've got a couple interesting stories.
Well, I think mine are more along the lines of, like the worldwide Dogmen.
Yeah, that happened.
Uh-oh. What happened?
I'll continue, just a little bit of light music.
Huh. What kind of light music? Like brown chicken, brown
soft
cow?
rock.
Like brown chicken, brown cow music? Like brown chicken, brown cow? That kind of stuff? No?
A little bit of,
Little bit.
Okay.
super swinging hits of the 70s.
There you go. So, I was fascinated when I started researching this that, I was kind of under the impression that it was a middle America thing,
Right.
And lo and behold, I come across a story from Australia where this guy says it stalked him for a month. And so I think, it just kind of blew me away that it's not just a middle America crypto story. It's a worldwide thing. And I was kind of impressed by the fact that this guy, took some pictures of an old tree stump sticking up in some other trees and kind of, zoomed in on it enough that it got blurry enough to be a Dogman. But then when you hear him talk about it, this guy had something happen to him. He rings with, he rings with some serious authenticity in his tail. And I kind of felt like he was, really had some kind of experience. I don't know what you felt about his story, but.
Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and play. We've got the footage lined up here. This was originally posted on the NewYorkPost.com. So let's go ahead and let's take a look.
If I could stroke twice and it'd take 2 steps, I'd do 4 strokes in a row and it would take 4 steps. And every time I stopped, this thing was stopping. So whatever it was following me. It wasn't just a coincidence or anything. And it was more of a stalk.
I mean, and you can see these 2 ears, right? I mean, I can't anyways. Now, this interests me on a lot of different levels, first of all, because I want to see if I can't, of course, now we're on to something completely different after the New York Post. But what I sort of wanted to take a look at here, and we'll just stop sharing it, was the 2 pointed ears.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these sightings say that the ears are like overpronounced. People have even likened its appearance to the werewolf from The Howling.
Yeah.
These large triangular shaped pointed ears.
And a couple of the reports that I read, again with that howling feeling, they said the ears were very large, had long hair coming off the ears that kind of gave almost like a waving appearance to the ears.
And another thing about this encounter is that I've read and heard other encounters where, and again, I don't know if this is sort of part of this, fight or flight reflex that takes over, but a lot of people talk about literally having this feeling that they need to get out of there immediately.
Yeah.
I know I would want to.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would definitely, I'd be sitting there, thinking to myself, like, this is it.
I'm dead.
Like, this is that moment.
Yeah.
Well, that's like I said, I was expecting this picture to be like some tree stump that the guy zoomed in on and over pixelated and everything. And, I look at those pictures and I can't tell you what it is. I can't say what's there. It doesn't appear to be, it doesn't appear to be like a branch of a tree or a broken off, tree stump or tree trunk. It doesn't appear to have been placed there. So it's very hard for me to discount, especially when you hear him talk about it. And he has that sound of like something really messed with his head. Wherever he was, whatever he was doing, something got inside his head and really screwed with him.
Yeah. And you've got another story as well, correct?
Right. This one comes to us from the great northern part of our country. And this particular person claims that they actually shot and killed some sort of mysterious canine. And this is in Montana. And it appears to be roughly, again, if you have the pictures, I think you have the pictures, right? This thing appears to stretch the full length of a full-size pickup truck bed. So it's a good, 6-7 feet from tip of the nose to tip of the tail. And
I mean, the feet alone are pretty impressive. The paws here.
Yeah. And there's the picture I was telling you about. I mean, that's a pretty long creature.
Yeah.
That's a good sized creature. And then you look at these ears in the picture that I think it's 2 down from where you are now. They have like a really good shot of these ears. And again, it's those long triangular ears again. Now, I mean, I can't say what this is. Is it a coy dog? Did someone's, Irish wolfhound, get busy with a coyote or something like that, or, and just created this, one-off. But
Right.
it has those weird physical characteristics that when you hear about dogmen, you hear about, okay, it has incredibly large paws. It's got these triangular ears. The hair,
Mhm.
the fur around its neck is much thicker and tuftier than on the rest of the body. This has all of that. This has all of those weird characteristic markings of, dogman. So
And we've got a piece of footage here. Somebody actually weighing in on this too.
They're often described as being 8 to 9 feet tall, sometimes smaller, but they're also described as being younger when they're described as being smaller. So we know that these things are, they're not just popping out of the ether into existence. They apparently have little ones, younger ones, and older ones, and these are a creature that are breeding and multiplying.
Do they ever walk on all fours?
They do. They've been seen going to all fours from an upright position and vice versa. In my research and investigation, I discovered that some of the very first sightings occurred in Wisconsin in the late 1800s at a place known as Aztalan State Park.
Uh-huh.
Aztalan, of course, is an allusion to the Inca home.
We've got a picture here of a Dogman track.
Right.
Really unusual, isn't it?
It is. It's usually a three-toed print. There's part of a dog's foot that when you look at how a dog stands, the pad is actually on the ground, and then there's this sort of 45-degree angle bone behind the foot. And a lot of these tracks look like these things have evolved to where that bone has now been pushed to the ground.
Yeah.
And is helping to support the weight of the creature. And it came to me one day that what we had to be looking at was either an etheric manifestation of this creature through some form of ancient worship, or these native people came across this creature in the wilds and began to deify it, that there were little to no other options.
I've actually been wanting to catch a few episodes of George Norrie's show Beyond Belief. So
yeah, it's been pretty good. The show itself has been really interesting.
So that does leave us obviously with some questions. I've heard from different people that one theory that's sort of prevalent is that these are manufactured animals. These are genetically
altered.
Yeah.
altered animals and it was done very purposefully. Again, I know we often, pin the tail on the donkey of the U.S. government being the antagonist here, but that's what I've heard, that this was something that was, just a genetic stew that was put together in a lab.
So Altered Beast is a true story, that game?
It is.
Okay.
It is. Which would stand to reason that all you have to do is just throw like a floating fucking eyeball at this
And
thing,
you'd be fine.
and it's done for. Because you'd try to lay down and kick it, and then the eyeball would jump on you, and then you were had. So apparently, this whole thing is revolved around Alter Beast.
I discounted those, that theory, just because of the fact that the first registered sighting in Michigan alone was 1887.
True, yeah.
So, it kind of leads me to believe that whole government testing, that if that's the case, were we really that far advanced in 1887?
Right. And it does seem like a relatively newer modern theory. It really does. Like this is
Right.
something that we could see maybe, in the mid 80s or, or more current.
Sure.
But anything past that, it's extremely doubtful, especially once we hear stories of indigenous people deifying these things too. That leads us to believe that, hell, they might have been here before we were.
And again, is it a species of wolf or dog that just has evolved to the point where it can walk upright? for short periods of time, or that's the question I have, because cryptozoology, so many people deify it, and like it's always gods, it's always it was worshipped as a god. What if it was just a species that has a limited range or a limited ecosystem to live in, and we stumble across it, and because it's a creature that acting outside of its norms, it's godlike.
We discover new animals every single day. I mean, it's not unheard of that we find something new. So why would this be so?
It's not uncommon for a ton of different quadrupeds to walk on two legs at some point.
Right.
We've seen it in
Yep.
goats, definitely canines, felines. So there are a lot of different animals that do walk on two legs. I think what bothers me about that particular theory is often the size.
Sure.
The size of these creatures, the overall feeling that people are getting, which almost lends a supernatural sort of quality to them. Now, I have a couple of reports that are way out there, and this also lends itself to the idea that this is more of a global phenomenon, not Middle America. And one of these, interestingly enough, is from an American comedian. And this story I heard roughly, I believe, about 15 years ago. So I don't know if people were familiar with a couple of, God, I even hate to use the word, but about the only way that I can really use it in a familiar sense. People used to call these guys shock jocks, like Howard Stern, but it was Opie and Anthony. I don't know if anybody remembers the
Sure.
Opie and Anthony show.
Mhm.
I don't even know if they're still in the air. I don't believe they are
I'm
anymore.
not sure if they are.
They're on I think they're on satellite radio now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, they were extremely controversial. They had rabid fans that would do any number of very horrible things to be mentioned on the air by Opie and Anthony.
Was one of them wearing an earpiece while walking a neighbor's dog?
Right, yeah, and just on an unbelievable amount of cocaine. So Opie and Anthony would regularly have rotating hosts, and a lot. I mean, it was really sort of like a circus each episode, because they would have a number of comedians, they would have actors on there. They'd usually have some kind of young girl, a la like Howard Stern show, but they had a lot of comedians. Like, comedians were sort of their bread and butter. They would have sometimes 2 or 3 per show. And when you had that kind of atmosphere, again, I mentioned the word circus, it was very like fly by the seat of your pants. It was very, everything was high noon with the insults and with the jokes. And it was a format that did really, really well at the time. It was definitely a, pre-cancel, pre, like, social justice era of radio. And it did really well. But there was a comedian that they would have on occasionally. And now for the life of me, I cannot remember his name. His first name was Robert. They called him Bob. God, I just had the guy's name.
I can't
This
remember it.
kills me because I've been looking at this all week. So, anyways, he was a regular on the show. He was on there quite a bit. And he was one of several comedians that were sent to Iraq as part of the USO shows. Like, and people don't realize that, the USO is usually equated with like World War II era, army entertainment.
Mhm.
But the USO organization is still active, and they will send. We're talking acts like Taylor Swift. They will send to entertain the troops over there. So a lot of very high profile entertainers will get sent, and unfortunately, sometimes not directly hostile areas, but adjacent hostile areas to entertain the troops. Oh, Bob Kelly is the guy's name.
All right.
So Bob Kelly, the comedian, was relating a story to Opie and Anthony. It's unfortunate that he did it in the form he did, because he was, excuse me, instantly chastised. But that was sort of the idea of their show. That was their shtick, was that no matter what you said on the Open Anthony show, if you were on it, you got chastised. You know, it was a very like it was very fraternal. It seemed very much, you know, like this collegiate sort of humor. Everyone's making fun of one another. So he was relating a story about being overseas in Iraq, and he was part of a comedy show that the USO was putting on. And, you know, they would have to like move during certain times in order to get you from one place to another. Like apparently, you know, you would land on a plane and then you would go from whatever airstrip that was to you know, whatever unit was stationed somewhere. You'd be there for a couple of hours and then they'd move you again to where you're performing. And I guess a lot of this was done also, you know, in like caravans with Humvees, because there were so many attempts at a lot of these caravans being bombed. So Bob Kelly released a story that he was with a Marine who was driving one of the Humvees. And this was in broad daylight. He said in broad daylight, they watched as a wolf in excess of about 7 feet tall, walking upright on two legs, walked directly in front of their Humvee. Apparently, he looked over at the Marine. What the hell is this thing? And apparently the Marine was very shaken, saying, I have no idea what that was. No idea at all. Now, that's one of two stories that I heard involving the military, one of which was another entertainer, similar situation. They're moving at night. They saw one at night. He asked his escorts, what is this thing? And they told him, unlike the Marine, we don't talk about it. To which point he asked, who does talk about it? And they said, basically, you know, a commander, whoever was going to be at the next station, ask him. So they get to the next place. He finds one of the higher ranking, you know, officers there and explains they were moving at night. They were moving slowly. And again, like if anybody listens to this who's in the military, I'm getting any aspects of this wrong, please, because I'm paraphrasing the whole thing. But there's a certain way apparently that they have to position their lights to be right in front of them, sort of on the ground.
Right.
Because otherwise they're just a moving target.
That makes sense.
So often you can't see things until it's almost directly in front of you. And apparently, again, one of these things came out, looked at them, turned back in the direction they were walking, and then completed across their field of vision. So he tells this story to one of the officers, and the officer says, you know, we don't talk about that, right? And he's like, no, I was told that you don't talk about that. Is there anything you can tell me? And I guess he replied with something very cryptic like, I'm just going to tell you, there's a whole lot of we don't talk about that going on.
Wow.
As if this was almost a regular occurrence of them seeing this thing.
Well, it's like when you know, the declassified UFO documents.
Yeah.
You know, you talk to these, you know, these military pilots and they're told, hey, if you even so much as say that you saw something, you're grounded. You know, so the pilots started coming up with, you know, these other little terms for it, like, you know, hey, we just saw Santa Claus or whatever it was, you know, so you got to wonder. I mean, these are people that are in areas that most people don't go to.
Right.
You know, they're traversing these, again, you know, I'm assuming Iraq, they're probably traversing great expanses of open mountainous territory that is not settled by, you know, modern convenience. It's settled by the people that have probably been living in those mountains, you know, for hundreds and hundreds of years, and just kind of that culture comes down. And maybe to them, it's just no big thing. you know?
Because what would we have out there? We basically have people and domesticated livestock, right?
I would think so.
And if you think about it, I'm just going to say, because this is what I've heard and seen the most, that domesticated livestock, a lot of that probably is goats, as far as Afghanistan's concerned. I mean, thinking about it, I mean, all of Jurassic Park, Apex Predator was a little snack. What are you going to go for?
There'd be no shortage of food.
Yeah, you have all these goats, and then if that doesn't necessarily satisfy your palate, you got the goat herder.
But
And
you
how
also,
many of those deaths, Rob, do you think probably go undocumented?
yeah, again, these could be closed off. I want to say again, ecosystems. You
Mhm.
know, it is these villagers or inhabitants, these settlers, have probably had these just hundreds of years have been spent in certain areas of this mountain or this valley or this cave system or whatever. And it's just for them, it's Tuesday. You know, this happens. This happens all the time for them, so they don't worry about it. For us, it's, oh my God, what the hell is this? You know, you look at the monks in Tibet and in Bhutan and all those places that they have these remote monasteries, and you talk to them about the Yeti, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Yeti's here all the time."
Yeah,
It's no longer a big deal to them. It's just like,
they're just old hands at this kind of stuff.
right, because there's so little interference from the outside world that the stories might not make it out, you know?
So I have another story that's fairly lengthy, and I will say, if anyone gets a chance, I always love to give a shout out to people who are doing really well at podcasting, especially podcasts that interest me, and one of which was just very specific to my interests and specific to tonight's focus. There's a podcast called Dogmen Encounters,
Ooh,
which is a really, really good podcast. And one thing that I really like that the host does is very often he'll have someone call in, and then he won't even ask them questions. He'll literally just let them tell their story at their own pace. And it's kind of interesting because when they do that, I think they get into this rhythm where they start to relive, the incident, and they do it in such a fashion that you're sort of feeling a lot of what they're feeling at the same time. So if you get a chance, check out Dogman Encounters. And this is where this story in particular comes from.
It's a good
And
podcast.
it's a
Man,
great
it's great.
podcast, and it's volumes. If you like Dogman stuff, we're talking easily over 100 hours
Yeah.
Available on the YouTube channel. So I was listening to Dogman Encounters, and this is one story that absolutely blew me away. And it did so for several reasons. One of which was just the cadence and the candor of the person telling the story. Um, I've always prided myself on having a fairly decent bullshit detector. And there are times where, voice inflection, there's something that nags at you. Even if the overall story you think might be real. You saying we have no audio, Rob? Did my audio come back? Nothing? Rob? No audio? Let me see this. Okay. Let me know if that came back.
Are we there?
Can you hear me, Rob?
yeah, I just briefly lost your audio there. I think you're back though.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Hear me now?
No, I've still lost you. But I was following what you were saying.
Okay.
So go ahead, keep
Hold on just
going.
1 second here. I'm going to pop out.
Oh, Ash jumped out, jumping right back in.
Going to pop back in. You hear me now? Nothing? Yeah, he must not be able to hear us.
No, I don't.
Are
think
you
so.
still picking up my audio?
Still
we
picking
still
up your
got
audio
you.
just fine. And it looks like my audio is registering in the software, but
This might be on my end, so keep going.
if I can be heard here. Not getting anything from any people, but again, I don't want to just keep going on for the next 20 minutes if we have no audio. So let me just see how we're
We'll just sit here
registering.
and stare at the
We'll
camera.
just sit here and stare at it.
That would be not interesting at all. Not even a little bit. I think Rob popped out. Oh, there we are.
Okay, so it looks like we can actually be heard, but apparently Rob cannot hear us. So I will go ahead and relate the story that I was talking about. So again, if you ever get a chance, Dogmen Encounters is a great podcast. And this was one of the stories that I found particularly chilling. So I cannot, unfortunately, remember exactly where the story took place. However, there's a 4-hour compilation of the most intense Dogmen encounters from Dogmen Encounters. So if you do actually go onto YouTube or any other place that Dogmen Encounters is available, and you search for most intense Dogmen encounters, not only will this show up, but it should be the very first story. So it's easy to get to. And that should give you some idea of exactly where this occurred if the person being interviewed does give their location. So this is, again, a story that it terrified me. I found it absolutely chilling. So the individual that was relating the story owned several acres of land in farmland. So part of his land he had his residence on, a fairly big backyard, and then beyond that backyard he had a stretch of woods that was also his. And then he had, I guess, adjacent properties that had farmland and also area for people's cattle. Now, in him leasing out that land, he was also sort of responsible for anything that happened on the land. So he had received several reports that some of the cattle people had seen were acting strange, to the effect where they were acting like they were being hunted. They were gathering in really small areas, keeping on one piece of the land for long, periods of time. Everything that you'd expect if they felt that a predator was coming in from, one area of, the whatever kind of, gated situation they were in, whatever fenced-in situation. So he had talked to his wife about it, and she said, we've also been hearing some strange noises in the woods just behind our property. And she said, we thought we were getting a limb that needed to be sheared from one of the trees that was hitting the side of the house. They went out to the house and they found some claw marks. And at that point, she was basically, the two stories started to merge, where we've got livestock acting funny like they're being hunted, and then we've got large claw marks. So she basically said, there's probably something that is messing with the cattle. We don't exactly know what it is. Now, they did have a lot of coyotes in the area. So he was prone to, running down the coyotes, sometimes having to shoot them to get off the property, obviously to protect his investment. So he was getting ready to check on some of the cattle. One of his next door neighbors was over, and he said, hey, do you want to come with me? That way I can shine the light and you can pick off some of the coyotes, if any of the cattle are in danger. Now, apparently, I guess coyotes cannot see red light.
I didn't know that.
So if you have a red filter over like a floodlight, you can shine the light practically directly on them and they won't see it. So he had this red filtered light, and I mean, I don't know how many people out there are familiar with small towns or rural environments, but one thing that we get quite a bit is we get quite a bit of like go-karts, golf carts, and really small vehicles to get from one side of the property
Yeah.
to the other. Like where I live, for example, I'm always seeing some kind of small recreational cart going from one stretch of this really long rural road to another. So a lot of people have these vast expanses of property. Instead of getting in a truck or their car, they'll hop in these carts.
They even deck them out.
Oh yeah,
Stereos
they'll trick them out too, which is crazy.
Paint jobs. It's amazing.
Right, it's like this subculture.
Yeah.
I had a great friend many years ago that was he had broken his neck and still enjoyed hunting. So he was kind of trapped, you know, in this, like, it was like a little 6-wheeled thing, and it had like a tripod mount on the front of it for his shotgun, and like he had it all. Like it was, you know, rolling hunting blind.
Right, yeah. You know, it basically it's like have cart will travel. All this stuff will be on it. And you'll see different kinds. Like you'll see some that are more traditional golf carts, and you'll see some that are like almost encased in plastic.
Yeah.
So they've got the roof, and then they've got like these plastic doors, and it's not glass. It's almost like a plexi that serves as a window.
Oh yeah,
So they can take them out.
Kind of
in the
like the
winter.
old Jeep.
Oh yeah, but they're
Yeah.
smaller, and I think these things will get to like 48 miles an hour. I think that's pretty much where they top out. So imagine one of these. It's enclosed. There's a door, and the window is sort of like a plexi kind of thing, you know. And you're not gonna go faster than about 48 miles an hour. Like that's where you're gonna top out. So he's got his buddy with him, his next door neighbor. His next door neighbor's got the shotgun. He's got the light. And he said that essentially his property, and I know this is going to be kind of bizarre here the way I'm going to describe it, but if you can imagine like a road, his property, his residence being like on the left-hand side, you know, farmland being on the right-hand side. And then if you were going down that road, you would see a road that would intersect it on the right. And apparently that road ends up narrowing to be more of just a path. It's enough to get this little cart in and off of, but eventually that path just goes to one of the end of the sections where the cattle are at. So he takes this right, goes all the way down this path to the point where basically he can't go any longer. And he said that while they were doing that, they were seeing a lot of deer exiting the farm ground to the left and the right of them.
Running for their lives.
Yeah, he said they were seeing deer, they were seeing other animals, they were seeing a ton of birds that they're being flushed out. And he said that his companion said, I think we should turn back. Like he just got that feeling, again, that feeling where there's a predator, you're being hunted. So he said, I think we should turn back. And he said, you know, I can't. I've had way too many reports of something being wrong with the cattle. You know, at this point, if there is something out here, which it clearly looks as if there is, I need to protect my tenants' livestock from it. So they go out, and apparently they see an edge of I love how my camera has decided that it doesn't want to focus on my face anymore.
No.
This
We're
is the camera that I
completely
didn't want to use, by the way.
It's better for me.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree.
The face for radio. So he sees the cattle grouped in very, very tightly in an edge of the land trying to get out. And then he looks at a small cluster of trees, and he sees what he thinks is an animal by the cluster of trees. So now he's about 20 feet. That's not much. That's a little more than what, a car length?
Yeah.
Like an
2 car
average
lengths.
Yeah.
car length.
Yeah.
He pans the light, hits the tree where he thinks this animal is at, and he sees what he clearly says is an animal that's hunched over and is grabbing onto the tree as if it's meant not to be seen, like it's trying to conceal itself. At that point, repositions the light on its face, which he describes as having a snout, two very long triangular shaped ears with lots of hair. And as he's looking at its face, this thing stands up. And the way he describes it standing up, again, everything I found about this encounter to be very, very terrifying, that he could almost hear, like it's the busiest day at the chiropractor, all of these parts sort of correcting themselves as it's standing up, and he's hearing this crunching sound. He says its full height when it does this is near 9 feet. He immediately looks over to tell his buddy to shoot it, and he's frozen in fear. Grabs the shotgun, and apparently clocks one off and hits the tree, then pulls another one off, and he said that it hit its chest, and he could actually see flesh come off of the chest. So now he's looking more closely at its torso, and the way he described it was this looked like a professional bodybuilder. The muscles were clearly defined. You could even see the striations in the muscle. As it was moving, the muscle was flexing, and it literally jumped. He said to almost the height of the tree into that farmland where all the animals had come out of. At this point, both he and his friend want to get the hell out. They've seen it clearly. They've been within 20 feet of it. They both realize this thing is huge. It's taken a shotgun hit. It didn't put it down. It jumped away. We need to get the hell out of here. They get back to the cart. They get inside. He's telling his buddy to reload the shotgun. His buddy's frantically trying to reload the shotgun. They're trying to get the cart up to speed. And he says his buddy looks at him, and face immediately drains of all blood, goes white, and he realizes this thing is on the other side of his window.
No.
Looks out the window, and he says the face is literally a foot from the window, meaning 2 feet away from his face. And it's pacing the cart. And at this point, they're about up to almost 40 miles an hour. He says he then sees it reach towards the front part of the cart and begins to slow it down. Now, the way he described his emotions during that period was again what lent a sort of weird credence to the story for me.
Yeah, I as I'm listening to you tell it, I mean, I can hear in your voice the believability that you had in his voice.
Yeah. And it was sort of there was a very no-nonsense way to his storytelling. Like, he had the opportunity to over-embellish if he wanted to, because he's talking about proximity to this thing. He's talking about it, a foot. So he said that the first thing that crossed his mind was, what are they going to say to my kid? He thought he was dead. He thought, what are they going to say to my kid? How are they going to tell him I died? He said it was a weird thought, but that was the thought. It wasn't I'm going to die. It's like he went immediately
It's a
past
when,
that.
not if.
Right. It was just, I'm going to die. How are they going to relate this to my wife and my kid?
Closed casket for sure.
You remember, I called you not long ago when that hawk swooped into my garage.
Yeah.
And I said, that thing was in there for no more than 10 seconds in my garage. And I said to you, one of the first thoughts that came to me was like, great, this is how I die.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
it's
this weird, mental image of, he got killed by a hawk. He got killed by a what?
Right. Like you're thinking like, who has to write my obituary? The poor soul. Because it already sounds like an 80s metal song. I got killed by a hawk. How do you not throw a little bit of Man-O-War in there, right? So, big, like the obituary's got a nice airbrushed, like maybe Boris Vallier, Frazetta. It's a Frazetta painting for your obituary because you got killed in an epic battle with a hawk.
And it's
heavy
just
metal font.
It's just the hawk head.
It's got an umlaut.
There you go.
It's got the hawk head and the talons just coming in like this, and the wings are like spread back. And
it's a Europe cover.
Oh yeah, yeah, we know this. And then the umlaut somewhere might be over your name, might be over the A in hawk. We don't know now. Might be HAUK. We might funk it up a little bit, throw the umlaut in there. So this guy's like, what are they going to tell my wife and my kid? Like he'd already went past, I'm going to die. It was, how in the world are they going to reconcile this to tell them that I passed? So he's looking at this thing and he's trying not to look at it. Like there's a part of him that's like, if you don't look at it, it's not there. But he can't quit looking at it. And he said that he looked at it at one point. It was starting to actually slow the cart down. And he said, I swear to God, I looked at it and I saw the fucking thing smile.
That's the creepiest part of that story.
Right. He was like, I don't know how that face managed it, but I swear to God, I saw this fucking thing smile. He says at that moment, his buddy got the shotgun loaded and it saw the shotgun being pointed at it and had the intelligence to realize that's the thing that hurt me by that tree. It ducked back into the farmland again. But mind you, they're seeing like the corn move as they're moving. This thing isn't giving up. It's pacing them in the corn. So now they're about, remember I told you that there's going to be a T in the road where they had to turn right. So now they've got to turn left, which mind you is heading towards that area a little bit. They're not turning away from where it's at, they're turning into it. So this guy said he's still with this guy. Thank God that he's got somebody with him. And they go to turn, and he said he couldn't slow down. It was a thing where he just couldn't get himself to slow down for the turn. He'd rather wreck than slow down. That's where his mind is at.
Right.
We're not going to go slower. This thing is off of the cart now. We're going almost 50 miles an hour. He goes to make the left turn and makes it in a way where he almost cuts into the corn. And when he does that, he sees this thing jump. And I guess it anticipated him slowing down, and it overshoots the cart. So they see it go over their cart. They make the turn. They look back. And now this thing is on all fours, and it's closing the gap. Buddy's got the shotgun loaded, pulls off, thing stops, and they make it to his property.
Now it's time to move.
So he and his friend have this discussion of, you're not telling my wife what you saw. We're not telling anybody yet what we saw. Goes inside the house. His wife was like, you look fucking horrible. You look bad. What the hell happened out there? And he's like, there was an animal. We took care of it. I don't want to talk about it. Just we took care of it. So apparently he was so rattled that he missed like the next 3 or 4 days of work. He wasn't talking. He was sleeping. He wasn't going out to the woods behind their house, which he did every day. He wasn't checking their trail cams, wasn't doing anything. And his wife, I guess, finally just said, hey, you need to tell me what happened. I've never seen you like this. You need to tell me what happened. And he told her, and I guess the first thing that she said in response to it was, you need to call the sheriff. And he's like, why in the world am I going to fucking call the sheriff?
Who's going to believe that story?
Who's going to believe it? And she goes, you don't understand. At least if you call the sheriff, they're going to send a squad car out here. If you don't, we have neighbors that might get fucking killed by this thing. So in her mind, it's like, we need to bring attention to the area. Even if it's negative attention, we need to bring attention to the area. So he calls the sheriff up. And this is where, I mean, as if this story wasn't outlandish to begin with, this is where it gets so far fucking off the rails. He calls the sheriff. Sheriff comes over, and he said, "Listen, I need to report. I need to make a report of a feral or rabid but aggressive animal." So he's like, "Okay, we need more details. What did you see? Where did you see it?" And I guess the guy stops, and he's making this decision. Do I tell the sheriff and just a horrible lie, or do I just throw caution to the wind and just go, I saw something that was out of the realm of my understanding? So he looks at the sheriff and he said, I'm going to tell you what I really saw. Please don't tell anyone. I'm a landowner. I have tenants. I've got a really good reputation. The nearest town is a small town. I don't want anybody knowing what I told you. And the sheriff looks at him and goes, I actually have a feeling that I know what you're going to tell me. But I want you to think about this. Do you want to tell me? Do you really want to tell me? And the guy's like, I think I do. For the sake of my wife and for everybody here, I think I do. Proceeds to tell the sheriff the story. And the sheriff at the end says, listen, don't go into the woods behind your house. Wait it out till tomorrow. I'm going to make a phone call. And the guy at this point is like,
who's he going to call?
Who the fuck are you going to call about? Like, who in the world are you going to call about this, right?
He's going to call
This is when
David
the Ghostbusters
Naughton.
theme starts.
Hey, he's going to call David Naughton. And the people from the Slaughtered Lamb.
Right, exactly. So he said, he tells his wife, he's telling her, don't go back there. Don't, somebody's going to give us the fucking go ahead when it's okay. He said the following day, like early afternoon, cop shows back and there's about 6 or 7 like black unmarked SUVs. The only thing they had on them were New York plates. He said these guys get out. They look like what you would think would be like military, but he says he can't find a single patch on them. They've got military style outfits on, no patches, nothing to designate rank or anything. He says the guy goes to talk to the sheriff, comes back to him, asks him to tell the entire story. He tells him the entire story. And apparently he says, okay, I'm taking 3 of my guys. We're going to go out here. By the time we get back, don't worry about this. It's going to be fine. So the guys take off, doesn't see him for about 6 hours. They come back, and he asks them first thing, he's like, so we're good. Like, this guy's really concerned about being able to do his job, to be on his land. And he's like, are we good? And they're like, we're pretty sure you're okay. And he's like, I don't deal in pretty sures anymore after this fucking deal. I don't. And they're like, we're pretty sure you're okay. We're going to be back in a week. So goes back to his wife. They leave. A day passes, doesn't hear anything back from the sheriff, doesn't hear anything from anybody, but he's like, they told me they'd be back in a week. They told me everything was going to be okay. So he does start to go back onto his property, doesn't see the cattle acting strangely. And then he realizes, oh shit, I haven't checked my trail cams in almost a week. Goes to check his trail cams, and the SD cards have been removed from every single trail cam he has. Week goes by, doesn't hear anything. Talks to the sheriff. Sheriff is like, they'll get her when they get here. And at the time of him telling the story, it had been a month and a half since he had talked to these guys and hadn't seen anything on his property and hadn't heard anything from them.
See, now, I know we're over the hour, but I got to kind of jump in there. This kind of goes along with a story that I heard. It was relayed to me many years ago. I was up in Maine, and I was there's a cryptid in Maine, the Wendigo. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not.
Yeah,
the Wendigo. Sure. And these people were having this problem or whatever it was, and similar situation where it was military type people, no markings, no insignia, no rank, nothing, just, and absolutely no communication. Like, they did not communicate with the people in the area at all. They just got out, did what they were going to do, communicated only with the law enforcement, left law enforcement to be the ones to communicate down to people, the people, and then just were gone. So I don't know. I kind of have this weird, Men in Black, Will Smith vibe from it. But at the same time, there's so many things.
I'm a logic chain kind of guy. Even when my logic chain becomes preposterous, like, I realize that my logic chain becomes horribly rusty and broken at some point. But in my mind, if we have things like this and they're in numbers, the same way that you have somebody, the same way you have a policeman, they take care of disturbances.
There's got to be somebody out there that takes care of it.
Yeah, it lends itself to the idea
or whatever,
that there's a contingency plan.
Right. And that's I guess that's my point, is that, that whole Men in Black, Will Smith, you and I have both seen, the footage from Area 51. There's plenty of stuff we don't know that happens. So if there is, a force dedicated to dealing with, these odd, happenings, then there is.
I'd kind of be more surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah. At this point,
especially at the way that our military throws money around,
right?
Like they're at a fucking cheap strip club outside the suburbs. It's like they spin it on worse.
It goes back to, why are we declassifying now all of these UFO files? Is it to desensitize the general population? Is it, is it being brought out so that the general population is now becoming comfortable with the idea that there are these whatevers, and so it's giving an opportunity for us to kind of
get used to it?
Yeah, get there at our own pace.
Yep.
Who knows?
Well, I thank everybody for being on tonight. Everybody who came in and listened to us to watch the live show. We had a great time talking about Dogman. I'm sure we will revisit the subject very, very soon. Remember to visit www.horror-fix.com. Also, make sure to tune in every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central. We're getting back on schedule, everybody. Hopefully, everyone will have a great time. Next few shows, we'll get something nice lined up for everybody. In the meantime, I'm Ash Hamilton with Ricky from horrorfix.com and Rob Pastilli. Everyone have themselves a fantastic night.